The city of Garvis never slept. Its twin suns lit the sky all day, and the neon signs lit the night all the same. In the southern market square, alien voices shouted prices, offered stale bread, sour fruit, and dry bones of old meat. The rich never came here, only the desperate did. Kalen, a human from Earth, walked slowly through the narrow alleys between vendor stalls. He wasn't dressed like the others, no robes, no glowing neck rings, no house markings. Just a worn jacket, dusty boots, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wasn't there to buy, not really, he was just passing through. Or so he thought. That's when he saw her kneeling beside a trash bin. An alien woman with dull lavender skin and tangled white hair was picking through bruised fruit skins. Two small children stood silently beside her. They didn't cry, they didn't beg, they didn't speak. Their eyes were wide, their clothes torn, their stomachs flat from hunger, but they obeyed completely. As if afraid to even breathe wrong, the woman whispered something to them, soft and careful, and then reached for half a rotten bread loaf. A vendor spotted her and snarled. "Get away, widow scum," he barked. "Go crawl back under your broken roof." She froze, lowered her head and stepped back without a word. Her hands trembled, but she didn't argue. She only turned, holding her children close as she walked toward the edge of the alley. Kalen followed her with his eyes. Something about the way she moved, slow, careful, ashamed, made him stop. He didn't know why he cared. Maybe it was the kids, maybe it was the silence. Then a patrol drone hovered overhead, scanning the alley for non-authorized lingerers. The drone beeped red when it saw the woman. It buzzed a warning. "Illegal loitering in merchant zone, prepare for citation." That's when she did something that made the entire street fall silent. She turned around, dropped to her knees in front of Callan, and whispered in a voice dry with fear and sadness, "My children are well behaved. I can be a good wife to you, human." The words struck him like a punch to the chest. Vendors stopped speaking. Customers turned their heads. Even the drone froze in midair, unsure what protocol to follow. Kalen looked down at her, stunned. The woman kept her head low, not looking him in the eyes. She added softly, "Please don't let them take us. We'll serve you, clean for you, work for you, anything. Just don't let them separate us." The children didn't flinch. This was not the first time they had seen their mother beg, but it might be the first time someone actually listened. The vendor who shouted earlier sneered. "Another beggar trying to seduce a human. Just ignore her, sir." Another merchant laughed. "Look at her, skin like dust, hair like straw. No one would take her even for free." Callan's jaw tightened. He looked around slowly, then crouched down. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her eyes blinking up at him, dry from weeks without proper water. "Valari," she whispered. "I used to have a home. My husband died in the mines. They threw me out after. Called me dead weight." Her hands pulled her children closer. "I'll never let them take my children. Not while I breathe." Callan stood up and turned to the drone. "This woman is with me," he said calmly. "Partner status. Temporary." He flashed his Earth citizen ID. The drone paused, beeped twice, then floated away without complaint. Valari's lips parted slightly, her eyes blinking in disbelief. You don't have to pretend," she said quietly. "They're gone now." "I'm not pretending," Callan replied. "Where's your home?" Valari hesitated, then pointed to a broken stairwell near the back wall of the market. A collapsing shelter, barely covered, no lights, no heating, and a torn blanket flapping in the breeze like a surrender flag. "I'll follow you," Callan said. Valari didn't understand. "Why?" She asked, "What do you want from me?" Callan looked at her starving children, at the bruises on her arms, at the bones sticking through their sleeves. "I just want to see where you live," he said softly. "Maybe bring some food." Tears welled in her eyes. Real tears, not from pain, but from something more dangerous. Hope, and from a rooftop nearby, someone watched all of it happen. Jealous eyes narrowed. A voice whispered into a comlink, "The widow just got herself a human. Let's see how long it lasts." Valari walked in silence. Her bare feet made no sound as she led Kalen through the narrow alleys of the old market sector. Her two children followed closely, holding each other's hands, never speaking, never complaining. They moved like shadows, practiced in disappearing, used to being unseen. The buildings grew darker the deeper they went. Abandoned stalls stood like skeletons, torn banners flapped in the wind, and the air smelled of rust and old water. Kalen kept his eyes on her back, noticing how her shoulders curled in, as if trying to make herself smaller. He had seen fear before, But this wasn't just fear, this was survival. They reached a cracked staircase that led underground. Valari stopped, turned to him and said softly, "You don't have to come down here, it's not safe, it's shameful," Callan replied. "I've been in worse places," and followed her anyway. The stairwell groaned as they descended. At the bottom was a tiny space that barely qualified as a room. Broken stone walls, a rusted pipe dripping water, and one torn blanket stretched across the floor. A dented cooking pot sat in the corner empty. There was no food, no bed, no light, just silence, cold, and hunger. Valari lit a small makeshift lamp made of oil and scrap metal. Its flicker revealed more than she wanted. Scars on her arms, bruises hidden under her clothes, and eyes that had cried until they forgot how to cry. She helped the children sit, then offered them a small piece of dried root from her pocket. They took it quietly and began to chew, as if used to the taste of nothing. Callan knelt down beside her. "You live here?" he asked, unable to hide the shock in his voice. Valari nodded, not looking at him. "I used to live in a real house," she whispered. "I had a husband. We had a room, a table, a window." Her voice cracked. "Then he died in the mine collapse, and his family said I was bad luck, said I brought the cave in with my cursed blood." She looked at her children. "They took everything, even his ashes. I begged them to let me keep the children. They said they didn't want the burden." Her eyes shone in the dim light. "I walked away with nothing but these two and a prayer they wouldn't starve." Callan listened, his fists clenched. No one deserved this. Not her, not the children, not anyone. She turned to him slowly. "I offered myself to you because I thought that's all I had left to offer. I've been traded before, sold as a worker, given as a gift, but my children, they are clean, they are quiet, they don't cry at night. I teach them not to." Callan looked at the two little ones again. The girl, maybe 6, curled into her brother's side like a kitten. The boy, perhaps 8, sat stiff, eyes wide and alert. Like a soldier in enemy land, he kept glancing at Callan, unsure whether he was danger or safety. "You don't have to offer yourself," Callan said gently. "No one owns anyone on Earth." Valari smiled faintly, but it was not a happy smile. "Earth sounds like a dream," she said. "Here, a woman alone is just something to be claimed or cast aside. No one marries widows here, and no one helps them without taking something in return." Callan stood and removed his backpack. He pulled out a small container, sealed emergency rations. He opened it and placed the contents in front of the children. Soft bread squares, protein paste, dried fruit pieces. They stared at it like it was gold. Valari reached for it, then stopped. Her hands shook as she whispered, "We can't repay you." "You don't need to," Callan replied. "Eat, rest, then we'll talk about what comes next." The children began to eat, slowly, not trusting the moment. But once the taste hit their tongues, they devoured it, careful but hungry. Valari watched them with tears in her eyes, not because of the food, but because they looked happy for the first time in months. Callan sat near the broken wall and stared at the old markings, faded drawings of what seemed like a family once lived here. Laughter echoed from the past, now replaced with silence and stone. Suddenly a soft voice broke the quiet. "Are you our new papa?" It was the girl, mouth full of fruit. Eyes wide with hope, Valari froze, ashamed. No, don't say that, he's just helping us," but Callan didn't answer right away. He looked at the girl, then at Valari and said, "I don't know if I'm anything yet, but I'm here, and I'm not walking away." Outside, a rat-like alien crept near the door, listening. Then it skittered away into the dark, carrying news for someone who did not want the widow to find protection. Not from a human, not from anyone. The next morning, the market woke early. Vendors argued. Drones hovered and footsteps filled the square with noise. But beneath the broken stairs, in that cold, hidden corner, there was something rare. Laughter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was soft, like the chirp of a bird that forgot it could sing. Valari's children, Nira and Juran, were playing with a piece of string Callan had knotted for them. Just string. But to them, it was magic. Valari sat beside a cracked wall, still not believing it was real. Her children were not crying, not shivering, not begging for food. They were playing. She held a small pot in her hands, and inside it were real ingredients: dried beans, grain, salt, and a cube of flavor stock Callan had given her. The small flame under the pot glowed with hope. She stirred slowly, savoring the smell that filled the space. A smell she hadn't felt in months. Home. Callan returned from outside carrying more supplies, a fresh ration pack, water container, and a folded thermal blanket. He knelt beside the children and handed them 2 warm gel packs. "Careful," he said. "Not too hot." They nodded without speaking, their eyes shining as they held the warmth close to their chests. Valari looked up at him, tired but grateful. "You didn't have to come back," she whispered. "You already gave us more than anyone else." Callan shrugged. "I told you I'm not walking away." Then he smiled. "Also, I was curious what was cooking." Valari chuckled softly for the first time in weeks. "It's nothing special," she said. "Just something warm." "To them," Callan said, nodding toward the children. "That makes it special." They sat on the floor together, sharing the warm stew. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't much. But it was made with care, and that made all the difference. Valari broke the food into small portions for the kids. Callan noticed how she ate last. And least, he handed her an extra ration bar from his bag. "No," she said quickly. "You keep it." "I'm full," he lied with a grin. "Had some earlier." She didn't believe him but accepted it anyway. For a few minutes no one spoke. Just the sound of spoons scraping bowls and children giggling quietly. Then Nira tugged at Callan's sleeve. She held out a folded piece of paper. Old, crumpled, but carefully drawn. It showed 4 stick figures holding hands, standing under 2 suns. The smallest figure had messy lines for hair. The tallest one had a square on his chest, his jacket, and above it, written in shaky letters, was one word. "Family." Callan stared at the drawing. He looked at Nira, then at Valari, who was trying not to cry again. "You made this?" he asked. Nira nodded, shy but proud. Callan folded the paper gently and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "I'll keep it," he said. "Thank you." Suddenly a voice outside yelled, "There she is, Valari the beggar, hiding with her human toy." Valari froze. She grabbed her children and pulled them close. Callan stepped forward and peeked through a crack in the stone wall. 3 alien men stood outside the stairwell, their bodies covered in merchant tattoos and metal badges. One of them spat. "She was supposed to be banned from the market." Another growled, "She's trying to play wife again, this time with an outsider." Callan opened the door fully and stepped out. His voice was calm but sharp. "She's not playing anything," he said. "She's under Earth protection now." He held up his ID again, this time adding a digital badge mark. "Civil Shield Delegate." The men stepped back, but one glared at him. "Just because you're human doesn't mean we'll forget what she did." "She owes us." Another sneered. "She's a stain, and stains spread." Callan stepped closer, not blinking. "She owes you nothing," he said. "Now go before I call Federation peacekeepers." The men muttered insults, spat near his boots, and left. Callan didn't watch them go. He turned and closed the door again, his jaw tight. Inside, Valari was trembling. "I didn't think they'd find me again," she whispered. "They used to own the housing sector where I lived. They hated my marriage to Roan, said I should have stayed a labor girl." Callan sat beside her, his voice low but steady. "They won't touch you again," he said. "Not while I'm here." Valari nodded, wiping her eyes. "I don't want your pity," she said, "but thank you." "I don't give pity," Callan replied. "I give second chances." Later that night, as the children slept under the thermal blanket, Valari sat beside the small flame and whispered softly. Today felt like a memory, not real life. She looked at Callan, her voice quieter. "Are you sure you want to be part of this?" Callan stared at the flame for a moment, then answered, "I don't know what I want yet," he said. "But I know I don't want to leave you here alone." Valari didn't say anything more, but in that moment, something in her heart lit up. Not just warmth, but the first tiny spark of trust. And far above, in the broken rooftops, the same spy who watched yesterday now sent another message. Humans getting close. This may be our chance to destroy them both. The night was quiet. Not even the wind moved through the broken stairway. Inside the small shelter, the children slept side by side, their arms around each other, dreaming of full bellies and warmth. Valari sat awake, knees pulled to her chest, her eyes watching the flicker of the dying flame. She hadn't slept, not fully, for weeks, maybe months. Callan sat across from her, silent. He didn't press her to speak, but tonight, her silence was different. It wasn't fear, it was memory, rising like smoke from old wounds. And then, slowly, she began to speak. "I was 12 when they sold me," she whispered, "to a grain lord on the edge of the Salt Mountains. He needed cheap workers, didn't care if they were too young." Her fingers touched the inside of her wrist, where faint marks remained, scarred lines shaped like letters. "He branded us," she said, "so we wouldn't forget who owned us." Callan leaned forward, not interrupting. Valari kept her voice low, but steady. "We weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to," she said. "If we made a mistake, we were punished. If we did good work, we were ignored." "One girl tried to escape," she added. "They cut her hair off and tied her in the sun for 3 days." Callan clenched his jaw. He had heard of such places, off-grid labor colonies, hidden from Earth records, protected by local power. "What happened to him?" Callan asked. "The grain lord." "He died," Valari answered. "But by then I was already sold again." The fire cracked softly. "In my third place I met someone," she said, a small smile appearing. "A miner named Roan. He didn't treat me like a servant. He treated me like I was real." "He saved you?" Callan asked. "No," she said. "I saved myself. I ran during a riot," she explained. "Found work at a mining port, worked in a washing line, and one day Roan saw me again. He remembered me, and he asked me to come with him. His family hated it," she added. "He was from a merchant caste, and I was nothing." "But he married you anyway," Callan said. Valari nodded. "We lived in a small room near the mines," she said. "Not much, but it was ours. We laughed, we made our own rules, and then—" Her voice cracked. "One day, the mine collapsed." Her eyes grew distant again. "I waited 3 days outside the gate," she said. "They brought bodies out one by one. When they handed me his tag, they didn't even look me in the eyes." Callan reached across the flame and placed a hand over hers. It was cold, trembling, but she didn't pull away. "They didn't let me keep the home," she said. "They said since I wasn't registered on his family scroll, I was never a true wife. They kicked me out with the kids, said they were a burden." She looked up at Callan, tears finally falling. "Since then I've been called many names: beggar, whore, ghost, waste. But I never let my children see me break. I promised them I'd always stand." Callan didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said everything: anger, respect, sorrow. Then a soft sound came from outside, a shuffle, a metallic clink, then silence. Callan stood and drew a small tool blade from his boot. He signaled Valari to stay low and crept toward the stairwell. He opened the door a crack and looked into the shadows. A figure moved across the rooftop above. Fast, quiet, watching. But just before it vanished, Callan caught a glimpse of something. A tattoo across its arm, the mark of a known slave trader syndicate. He shut the door carefully and turned back. "They're watching," he said. "Not just jealous merchants. Someone else is interested in you." Valari's face paled. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let them take my children." "They won't," Callan replied, his voice firm. "Not while I'm breathing." But inside, Callan knew this was more than charity now. This wasn't just helping a widow. This was a fight against those who believed they could use people and throw them away. He pulled out a small communicator from his coat. He hadn't used it in months, but tonight, he sent one encrypted message to an old contact on the Earth Protectorate station orbiting above. "Need relocation IDs. Priority level 2. Human protection requested for 3 aliens. It would take days, maybe a week. Until then, he had to protect them here. With his eyes, his words, and if needed, his fists. Valari sat beside her children again, brushing their hair back, humming an old song she once sang to them when they had beds. Kaylin leaned against the wall watching her. She wasn't weak. She was a survivor, a fighter, a mother. And as the flame died down for the night, he made a silent promise to himself. He would not let her lose again. Not to hunger, not to cruelty, and not to fear, but far away in a merchant bar hidden behind shimmering cloth doors. A message arrived. Human found protecting target Valari. Initiate extraction before papers are issued. The chains of her past were not done reaching for her yet. The next morning started with a knock. Not a gentle one, not a friendly one. It was sharp, heavy, and full of authority. 3 more knocks followed, louder than the first. Then a robotic voice echoed through the stairwell. Open for patrol verification. Failure to comply will result in forced entry. Valari's face turned pale. She clutched her children tightly, backing into the farthest corner of the shelter. Kaylin moved fast, stepped toward the door, and called out calmly, "State your reason." The voice replied, "Routine sweep of non-citizen housing. Suspected undocumented families. Security scan required." Callan opened the door. Just a crack outside stood 2 patrol guards. Gray armor, red visors, hands resting near their sidearms. Their posture was lazy, but their eyes were sharp. They didn't expect trouble, but they were always ready for it. "You're not from here," one guard said, scanning Callan's face. "No," Callan replied, showing his Earth citizen ID. "I'm staying here as protection. The family inside is under my watch," the second guard scoffed. "Funny thing," he said, tapping on his wrist device. "This woman, Valari, she's flagged in the system. Unfit mother. Rejected caste. Formerly registered as bonded labor." Callan's jaw clenched. "She has children," he said. "They're not criminals." The first guard leaned forward. Voice cold. "She has 3 days," he said. "Then she's off this block. Local law says no loiterers without license, no minors without shelter registration, and no widows without sponsor bond contracts." Callan stepped forward, eyes locked. "She's with me," he said slowly. "I am the sponsor." The guards exchanged looks, then smirked. "You think your ID will hold back the law?" One asked. "This isn't Earth, human. This is Garvas. You've got 3 days to prove it, then she's either licensed, gone, or separated." They turned and walked off, leaving dust and silence behind them. Callan closed the door slowly. Heart pounding, Valari stared at him, tears already forming in her eyes. 3 days, she whispered. "They'll take my babies. I knew it. I knew this was too good to last." "No," Callan said, shaking his head. "We're not running." He pulled out his communicator again. The message he sent last night, marked urgent, still showed pending. It would take time, maybe too much time. Valari sank to the floor, hugging her children as if they might vanish if she let go. "I've lost everything once," she said. "I can't lose them too." Callan paced the room. Thinking fast, Earth Protectorate IDs were slow. But there were other ways, illegal, risky, expensive. He had contacts in the underdistricts, places where papers could be forged, but the price was always high. He looked at Valari again, tired, thin, but strong. She would die for her children. He knew that without question. The problem was the world they lived in would let her. He made a choice. "I need to leave for a few hours," he said. "Stay inside, don't talk to anyone. Don't open the door for anyone." Valari stood, eyes wide with fear. "Where will you go?" She asked. "What if you don't come back?" Callan gave her a small smile. "I always come back," he said. "It's one of my few good habits." She grabbed his hand, gripping it tight. "Just promise me. If something happens, you'll take them. I'll take all 3 of you," he said. "I promise." Then he left. He moved fast through the lower districts, past vendors, drones, and steaming sewer grates. He found a shop that didn't have a name, just a red curtain and a flickering green eye above the door. Inside sat a 4-armed creature with metallic skin and a voice like sand. "You again," it said. "Didn't think I'd see you after that mess on Parnas 4. "I need IDs," Callan said. "For 3? Mother and 2 kids?" The creature raised an eyebrow. "Alien widows and kids? That's high risk," it muttered. "Even higher price." "How much?" Callan asked. The number made his stomach twist. It was nearly everything he had left. Every credit saved from jobs. Every emergency fund, even the backup account on Earth. Done, Callan said without hesitation. You always were stupid, the creature said, smirking, but honest. An hour later, Callan walked out with 3 new chips, freshly encoded, fake but hard to trace. They'd get Valari and her kids through the next checkpoint. Maybe more, but now Callan was broke, totally broke. He returned late in the evening, dirt on his face, clothes soaked from rain, but a fire in his eyes. Valari ran to the door when she saw him. You came back, she whispered, voice full of shock and relief. I said I would, he replied, handing her the ID chips. Use these if anything happens, he said. But don't run unless you have no choice. Valari took them carefully, holding them like fragile gems. Then, without thinking, she reached up and hugged him tight, desperate, thankful. Callan stood frozen for a moment, then slowly wrapped his arms around her. Just for a second, the world outside disappeared. But far away in the city patrol station, a merchant handed over a credit stick and said one sentence. The human is interfering with business, make it look like an accident. Rain poured down on the market square. Heavy droplets bounced off cracked stone and old awnings. Vendors shouted under wet tents, pulling covers over cheap goods. But something unusual was happening today. People weren't talking about sales. They were whispering about a human and a widow. Callan stood in front of the permit station, soaked, tired but firm. Behind him stood Valari, her 2 children holding onto her dress. They looked out of place like fragile paper in a storm. But Callan's voice was strong. I'm registering a bond claim, he said to the station clerk. Under Earth Protection Agreement 47 Delta. The clerk, an old Zarn with 2 blinking eyes and a crooked smile, looked up slowly. You're claiming a widow? He asked, blinking again. You sure you want that on your record? Callan nodded. I'm not claiming her like property, he said. I'm marrying her. The clerk laughed, a long, dry cackle. You humans really are strange, he muttered. You take our castaways and turn them into treasure. The machine hummed, scanned their IDs, real and fake, and flashed green. Bond approved, the screen said. Temporary until formal ceremony, Valari gasped softly. You just told the city you're my husband, she whispered. Her voice shaking, Callan turned and looked her in the eyes. Would you rather live in fear? He asked. Because I won't let them take you or your kids, not now, not ever. Valari stepped forward, her hand trembling as it touched his. I don't know how to be a wife again, she said. I don't have a dowry or fine clothes, or even a name that means anything, Callan smiled gently. You have everything that matters, he said. You're brave, you're loyal, you fight for your kids. I don't need silk, I need someone real. Word spread fast. By midday, half the market knew. By sundown, the entire block buzzed with gossip. Disbelief and anger. She married him. One vendor growled, he must be sick. A human marrying a widow? Another spat. He's embarrassing our whole sector, but others said nothing. A few even looked thoughtful. Some watched from windows, wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was still some kindness left in the world. That night, the 4 of them gathered in the small shelter. Valari tried to fix her tangled hair, but the mirror was cracked and the comb was broken. I wish I could look beautiful, she whispered. Just for one day. Callan looked at her from across the room. You already do, he said. You don't need paint or ribbons. The ceremony was simple, barely official. An old priest from the back alleys agreed to do it for a meal and a blanket. They stood under a plastic canopy, with dripping corners and flickering lanterns. Valari held her children's hands as Callan spoke the words. I vow to protect you, he said. Not because you are weak, but because you are strong. I vow to treat your children as my own. Valari's voice broke as she spoke. I never thought I'd have a home again, she said, but maybe. Home isn't a place, it's a person. The priest smiled and raised his hands. Bond complete, he said. By street law, protectorate promise. And faith, and just like that, Valari became someone again, not an outcast, not a ghost. A wife, a partner, a human's family. Later, as they walked through the street, some sneered. Others turned away. But Callan held her hand proudly without shame. And when one merchant spit near their feet, Callan stopped. He looked the man in the eye and said calmly, She's worth more than every credit you've ever touched. At that moment, something changed. Valari stood taller, her children smiled wider. The people watching, silent, couldn't say a word. But not everyone was silent. Inside a shadowy office above the market, a man watched through a lens. One of the guards who had threatened her before now paced the room. Furious, "They're mocking the law," he growled. She tricked him. No, the merchant beside him said. "She's smarter than we thought. They're spreading weakness," the guard snapped. "If others see this, they'll follow." The merchant leaned back, his eyes cold. "Then we end it," he said. "Tonight, back in the shelter." Valari tucked her children in and sat beside Callan. She placed her head gently on his shoulder and whispered, "You gave us a name again. You already had one," he said. "I just helped the world see it. They didn't know danger was coming. They didn't hear the boots gathering in alleys, or see the silent message sent across the rooftops. But the warmth between them was real, and in a place where love was rare and kindness was dangerous, that warmth was more powerful than fire, and someone wanted to snuff it out before it spread." The morning sun rose slowly over Garvis. Its light passed through broken buildings and dirty rooftops. But somehow, when it reached the old stairwell where Valari lived, it felt warm. Inside, the tiny shelter had changed. The old blanket on the floor had been replaced by a thermal mat. The rusted pot was now a clean cooking pan, and the children, Nira and Jurin, laughed as they stacked small wooden blocks Callan had found at the salvage yard. For the first time, their laughter echoed without fear. Valari stood at a small stove stirring stew, her hands steady. Her hair was brushed, her shoulders straight, her eyes soft but awake. This was not the same woman Callan had met near the trash bins. This was a mother, a wife, a fighter with a reason to smile. Callan sat nearby, fixing a small solar lamp. The light flickered, then glowed steady. He smiled. "We've got light now," he said. "Real light." Valari turned and looked at him. "You gave us more than light," she whispered. "You gave us a home." Before he could answer, the door cracked open, 3 sharp knocks. Callan stood slowly, heart suddenly heavy. Valari pulled the children behind her, her hands shaking. He opened the door, ready for a fight, but it wasn't the patrol. It was a tall woman in a dark coat, her badge flashing silver. "Earth Protectorate," she said. "Delegate Yara Tren. We received your emergency bond request, ID confirmed. Emergency protection granted." Callan exhaled slowly. "You're late," he said. Yara stepped inside, scanning the room. She looked at the family, the children, the makeshift furniture. "You've done well," she said softly. "Most don't last this long down here." She handed Valari a small envelope. "Inside is your official ID, Earth protection status for you and your children, plus credits for relocation." Valari took it with shaking hands, her mouth open but unable to speak. "Your husband's request was marked as high priority," Yara added, smiling slightly. "Very few men do that for aliens, especially widows." Callan looked at Valari. "You're not just anyone," he said. "You're mine now," Valari whispered. "Thank you," but her voice cracked with emotion. Her hands covered her mouth as tears slipped down for once. They weren't tears of fear or hunger. They were tears of freedom. The children looked up at Yara, confused. "Does this mean we get a real house?" Jurin asked. Yara knelt beside him, smiling. "Not just a house," she said. "A place where no one can ever take you away again." But outside, danger still waited. The merchant who hated Valari had sent his guards to block the exits. They were told to drag her back, to erase her record, to make an example out of her and the human who dared protect her. As Yara finished her inspection, Callan's communicator beeped. Low signal warning. He frowned, glanced out the door, and saw movement in the alley, 2 men armored, silent, creeping forward with stun rifles in hand. Callan acted fast. "Yara, get them out now," he said. "We're not safe yet." Yara didn't ask questions. She tapped her badge, activating emergency transport. A quiet buzz filled the room as a blue shimmer circled Valari and the kids. But before the beam activated, one of the thugs burst through the stairway entrance. Gun raised. "No one leaves," he shouted. "That widow belongs to the market." He fired once, missing, then raised his weapon again. Callan didn't hesitate. He tackled the man, slamming him into the wall. They struggled, fists flying, boots kicking stone. The second thug ran in but was hit in the leg by Yara's stun stick. "Transport now," she shouted. The beam lit up. Valari screamed as Callan shoved her toward it. "I'll follow," he yelled. "Go!" And in a flash, they were gone. The room was dark again. Only Callan. 2 unconscious guards, and Yara remained. "You could have left with them," Yara said. "I said I'd take all of them to safety," Callan replied, breathing hard. "And I will. Later that day, in a quiet relocation center orbiting above Garvis, Valari sat on a real bed, her children wrapped in clean blankets. She stared at the door, praying he'd walk through. Then, it opened. Callan stepped in. Bruised, tired, but alive, Nira ran to him first. Then Juren, Valari walked slowly, then broke into a run. She threw her arms around him and cried into his chest. "You came," she whispered. "You're safe, I promised, didn't I?" he said, smiling. "We're home now." The new home wasn't big, but it had real windows, warm lights, food in the kitchen, and beds with pillows. It had laughter, it had peace, it had love. And on the wall above a simple table hung a drawing. 4 stick figures holding hands, standing under 2 suns, above it written in soft handwriting. Family.